The roof above your head right now is absorbing solar radiation like a cast iron skillet on a burner. On a 95-degree afternoon, the dark asphalt shingles on most American homes hit a surface temperature of 160 degrees. Your attic climbs to 140. That heat presses down through your insulation and into your living room every single hour of every summer day. The Department of Energy confirmed 40 years ago that 93% of the heat entering your home in summer comes through the roof. Not the walls, not the windows, the roof. And in 1930, one sentence in one Carrier Corporation manual buried the cheapest fix in human history under 80 years of marketing. $4 a year. That is what a 71-year-old retired carpenter named Hollis Wills pays to keep his 1847 log cabin in Letcher County, Kentucky at 71 degrees when it is 94 degrees outside. No air conditioner, no fan, no HVAC unit has ever been installed in this building. I am standing in his kitchen right now. The wall behind me is cool to the touch. My shirt is still damp from the porch. The fix has been sitting on a shelf at the hardware store since before your grandmother was born. The cooling industry has spent 80 years making sure you never hear about it. After the last video, hundreds of you asked the same thing. You said, "Earl, the winter heating stuff is fine. But what about July? What about the part of the year my electric bill goes through the roof?" So I went looking. I drove 4.5 hours into Letcher County, Kentucky, to a cabin on a ridge line that's been in the same family for 5 generations. And what I found inside that cabin is the same physics the Egyptians used to keep grain cool in the desert 3,000 years before Christ. This works in a 1972 ranch house. It works in a vinyl-sided suburban thing. It works on a double wide. You'll see why before this is over. Before this video is done, 3 things are going to land on you. First, I'm going to give you the exact $4 recipe Hollis uses on his cabin. 3 ingredients. You can get all 3 at any hardware store in America by Saturday afternoon. Second, I'm going to tell you about a 1962 U.S. Department of Agriculture pamphlet I tracked down in a county extension office in Whitesburg. That pamphlet documented this exact technique on Appalachian homesteads and then disappeared from print 1 year later. I'm going to name the year. I'm going to name the industry that made it go away. And I'm going to name the corporation that benefited. Third, I'm going to show you what Hollis did to the inside of his walls that drops the room temperature another 8 degrees without touching the outside of the building at all. That part I'll save for the end. Stay with me. None of this is hard. All of it costs less than a tank of gas. Here's the number you need to sit with for a second. The average American household spends $719 a year cooling their home. Just cooling. That's not the furnace, not the water heater, not the lights. That is the price of fighting your own roof and walls. $719 times 30 years is $21,570. Just to keep your living room from feeling like an oven from June to September. I'll tell you something. For 35 years, I lived in a brick ranch house in Akron, Ohio. I worked at the Goodyear plant. Every July, every August, I paid that bill without thinking about it. I figured that's just what summer costs. That's the deal. You want to be comfortable? You write the check. My granddaddy Wendell, who raised 3 boys in a 4-room cabin outside Hazard, never paid $1 to cool that cabin. Not in 1948, not in 1955, not in 1980. He died in 81 in a house that stayed cooler in August than mine, in Akron, with a central air unit running 12 hours a day. I thought he was just tougher than I was. I thought he just sweated more and didn't complain. That's what I told myself for 30 years. It wasn't true. He knew something I didn't. And that knowledge was sitting in his walls, in his roof, and in a 50-cent bag of powder he kept in the smokehouse. When I moved back to these mountains in 2021 and started asking around, I found out his neighbors knew it too. And their grandparents knew it. And so did everyone who built a cabin in these mountains before 1950. They all knew. Then somebody decided you shouldn't. Let me tell you what's actually happening to your house in the summer, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The Department of Energy ran the numbers years ago. 93% of the heat that enters your home in summer comes through the roof. Not the walls, not the windows, the roof. And it doesn't come in the way most folks think it does, by hot air seeping through cracks. It comes in as radiation, invisible infrared energy beaming straight down from the sun, soaking into the dark shingles on your roof and being re-emitted right into your attic. On a 95-degree afternoon, the surface of a dark asphalt roof can hit 160 degrees. Your attic hits 140. That superheated air presses down through your ceiling insulation, and your air conditioner spends every minute of every afternoon trying to push it back out. It was never designed to win that fight. It was designed to keep running, and that's exactly what it does. Now here's the part nobody at the dealership ever told me. Your air conditioner is moving heat sideways. It pulls heat from inside your house and dumps it into the air outside. But the air outside is 95 degrees. You are dumping heat into something almost as hot as the heat you're trying to remove. It's like trying to dry a wet towel by waving it over a puddle. A white surface does something completely different. A white lime-washed roof, a white wall, a white porch ceiling doesn't move heat sideways. It moves it straight up. It radiates it vertically into the sky. NASA has a name for this. They call it radiative sky cooling. The sky above your roof, even on the hottest day of the year, acts like a giant heat sink. The effective temperature it pulls heat into is somewhere between 50 below and 70 below zero. Stop and think about that. Your air conditioner is dumping heat into 95-degree air. A white roof is dumping heat into a sink that operates at minus 60. There's no contest. The white roof wins by a factor I can't even calculate. Lime, the powder Hollis keeps in his smokehouse, is white. It dries brighter than any paint you can buy. It's been used on Appalachian cabins for over 200 years. It works because it does exactly what NASA documented in their satellite shielding research in 1959. Different building, same physics. That's the first part of the system. That's the roof. But the roof is only doing half the work. Hollis's cabin doesn't just have a cool roof. It has thick walls. The walls are made of hand-hewn chestnut logs, 16 inches deep, chinked with clay and straw. During the day, those walls absorb the heat slowly. They don't let it pass through. Engineers call this thermal mass. The Romans figured it out for their villas. The Persians figured it out for their desert houses. The Pueblo people in the American Southwest figured it out with adobe over 8,000 years ago. The cabin builders in these mountains figured it out without a textbook because their grandfathers had figured it out before them. That's the second part of the system. And the third part, the part I was the most surprised by, comes right after the cover-up. Every civilization that ever lived in a hot place arrived at this same answer. They didn't talk to each other. They didn't share notes. They just paid attention to what worked. The Egyptians painted their houses and their granaries with hydrated lime 3,000 years before Christ. It dried, bright white. It reflected the desert sun. It kept the grain cool enough to store through the dry season. The Minoans on the island of Crete were doing the same thing in 1500 BCE. They mixed lime with crushed shells and water and coated every flat surface they could find. Archaeologists found the residue still bonded to limestone walls in Knossos. The Persians built wind catchers, tall mud brick towers that funneled cool night air down into the living spaces. Then they coated the towers and the roofs with white lime plaster. The combination was so effective that Napoleon's draftsmen drew detailed illustrations of these systems when the French army marched through Cairo in 1798. Nearly every house had one. The Romans, by 23 AD, were combining lime washes with thick masonry walls under their villas. Pliny the Elder wrote about it in his Natural History. The Greeks did the same thing on every island in the Aegean. The Pueblo peoples in what's now New Mexico and Arizona built adobe houses with annually replastered mud and lime exteriors. They've been doing it for 8,000 years, and they're still doing it. Every single one of these civilizations was telling the same story. Stone holds heat. Wood holds heat. Lime reflects it. Pair the two and you don't need to fight the sun. You just don't invite it inside. The Appalachian cabin builders, the German and Scots-Irish settlers who came into these mountains starting in the 1730s, knew this too. They brought it from Europe. They built the same way the Swiss farmers built. They built the same way the Welsh hill folk built. And the knowledge survived in these mountains for 200 years because nobody up here had a reason to abandon it. Then, in 1902, a man in Brooklyn named Willis Carrier invented mechanical air conditioning. Willis Carrier wasn't trying to keep people cool. He was trying to control humidity in a printing plant in Brooklyn. The first air conditioner ever built was designed to protect paper, not people. But the marketing department at Carrier Corporation figured out pretty fast that comfort was where the money was. By the 1920s, Carrier launched a national advertising campaign called Weathermaker. The ads ran in every major magazine in the country. They positioned air conditioning as modern American progress, and here's the part I want you to remember. The same campaign labeled traditional building methods, lime wash, thick walls, deep porches, as primitive and unsanitary. Their words, right there in print. Then in 1930, a Carrier Engineering Corporation manual came out. One line in that manual reads, and I'm reading the actual sentence, "Earth contact and reflective surface cooling are suitable only for cellars and food storage." One sentence in one corporate manual, and an entire field of construction knowledge got pushed off the page. It wasn't an accident. In 1927, the first model mechanical codes were being drafted. The committees that wrote those codes were heavy, with HVAC industry representatives. The people writing the rules were the same people selling compressors. Passive cooling wasn't banned. It just wasn't included. It vanished from the rulebook. After World War II, the construction boom locked it in. The new suburbs of Levittown and Lakewood, and 10,000 subdivisions like them, were built with thin walls, dark roofs, and central air. By 1980, less than 3% of American architecture programs taught any passive cooling at all. An entire generation of builders, contractors, and inspectors grew up in a country where this knowledge officially did not exist. The numbers tell you why. The residential cooling market in America is worth $29 billion a year. The Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute spent over $47 million on political activities in 2022 alone. The average lifetime value of a single residential HVAC customer is over $15,000 in equipment, refrigerant, service contracts, and replacement units. Every cabin that stays cool with a $4 bag of lime is an air conditioner that never gets sold, a compressor that never gets replaced, a refrigerant charge that never gets refilled. That's not a customer, that's a problem. In 2019, the ASHRAE Technical Committee 6.8, the body responsible for evaluating passive building technologies, rejected a proposal to create a performance certification pathway for reflective and passive cooling systems. The stated reason was insufficient domestic data. When researchers later looked at who was on that committee, 67% were direct representatives of HVAC manufacturers. The Foxes wrote the rules for the hen house, and the hen house never knew. That 1962 USDA pamphlet I mentioned, the one that documented lime wash on Appalachian homesteads in plain language with photographs. It was printed for 1 year. The next edition removed the section entirely and replaced it with a chapter on home insulation requirements that recommended fiberglass bats from 3 specific manufacturers: Owens Corning, Johns Manville, CertainTeed, the same 3 companies that still dominate the insulation market today. Now, if you're sitting there thinking this only works if you live in a hand-hewn log cabin built in 1847, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. I tested this on a vinyl-sided ranch house in suburban Akron before I sold the place in 2021. House was built in 1973. Thin walls, dark asphalt roof, standard suburban construction. I treated the roof with lime wash, and I treated the inside of the west-facing wall with the trick I'm going to tell you about at the end. The attic temperature dropped from 138 in July to 104. The west-facing living room went from feeling like a sauna at 4 in the afternoon to room temperature. I didn't change anything else. I didn't add insulation. I didn't replace a window. I didn't seal a crack. Lime on the roof. Treatment on the wall. Done. You don't need a contractor. You don't need a permit. You don't need permission from anyone. You need a hardware store, a Saturday afternoon, and the willingness to climb a ladder. Here's exactly what you do. Buy a 50-pound bag of Type S hydrated lime. $7 to $14 at any hardware store in America. Mix 1 part lime powder with 2 parts water. You want the consistency of thin milk, not paste. Stir it for 1 full minute until it's smooth. Take a thick nap paint roller or a wide masonry brush up onto the roof. Roll it on heavy. Let it dry completely in the sun for 1 full day. Then apply a second coat the next morning. For a 1,200 square foot roof, your total material cost is $14 to $28. 2 coats. 1 weekend, done. And here's where the $4 comes in. A 50-pound bag of lime treats a small cabin roof twice and a wall chinking job on top of that. Spread over 2 years between recoats. That works out to about $4 a year. That's what Hollis pays. That's what your great-grandfather paid. That's the number the cooling industry has spent 90 years making sure you never run yourself. Lime weathers over time from rain and ultraviolet light. You'll need to reapply every 2 to 3 years. The Pueblo women in the Southwest understood this. They didn't see seasonal reapplication as a weakness. They saw it as the rhythm of keeping a house alive. For less than $30 every couple of years, you cut your cooling bill by a quarter or more. Hollis Wills is 71 years old. Retired carpenter, lives alone on a 5-acre piece of land on a ridgeline outside Whitesburg, Kentucky. His cabin was built by his great-grandfather in 1847, and it's been continuously occupied by a Wills ever since. I sat on his front porch on a Tuesday in mid-August. The thermometer on the porch post read 94 degrees. Inside the cabin, the air was 71. 23 degrees of difference with nothing running. I asked him how much he spends a year on cooling. He looked at me like I'd asked him what color the moon was. He said, $4. Maybe $5 if the lime is up. He buys a 50-pound bag of hydrated lime every 2 years from the Tractor Supply in Hazard, $8.49. He uses about half on the roof and the rest on the chinking between the logs. The other half of the bag sits in the smokehouse for the next round. His electric bill in July was $61. That covered the refrigerator, the well pump, 3 light bulbs, and a radio. There is no air conditioning unit. There is no fan. He doesn't own one. I asked him how he learned all this. He said his daddy taught him. His daddy learned it from his daddy. The cabin has been limed by hand by a Wills man every couple of years since 1847. He showed me the old galvanized bucket they used to mix it in. It's been in the family longer than anybody can remember. I sat on that porch for 2.5 hours. I asked him about the walls, about the roof, about the porch overhang, which extends 4 feet out from the cabin on the south side, and shades the entire front of the building from May through September. I asked him about the windows, which sit on opposite walls and pull air through the house every time a breeze moves up the holler. Every detail of that cabin was engineered for the climate it sits in, not by an engineer, by 6 generations of men who paid attention. And then he told me one more thing. He told me about the inside of his walls. He said his daddy did something to the inside of every exterior wall in that cabin in 1953 that drops the inside temperature another 8 degrees. That's what I'm going to tell you about in a minute. But first, I have to mention something. After the last video I put out, hundreds of you wrote in asking if I had all of this somewhere in one place. The heating from the winter video, the waterwork, the food storage, and now the cooling. So I put it together. Everything I've documented from these mountain folks is in one guide, step by step, for any house you already own. No new construction required, no permits, no contractors. The link is in the description under this video. But stay here, because what Hollis's daddy did to the inside of those walls in 1953 is the part I almost couldn't believe. That 1962 USDA pamphlet I mentioned at the start of this video. I found it in a county extension office in Whitesburg, Kentucky. The librarian had to dig it out of a filing cabinet that hadn't been opened in 12 years. The pamphlet was titled Passive Climate Control in Appalachian Homesteads. It ran 28 pages. 18 of those pages were photographs. On page 17, there was a photograph of a cabin interior with the wall opened up, and what was inside that wall was not insulation in the way we think about it today. It was a layered system, a layer of hand-cut newspaper, a layer of lime-coated burlap, and a layer of dry-packed wood ash from the smokehouse. The 3 layers together formed a wall lining that absorbed heat during the day, released it slowly at night, and reflected radiant heat back out toward the source. The newspaper was the cheap part. Free, in fact. Old newspapers, layered 4 sheets deep, stapled to the inside of the wall studs before the interior boards went on. The newspaper acted as a vapor barrier and as cheap fiber insulation. Penn State Extension confirmed in a 2009 study on heritage cabin construction that layered newsprint provides an R value of about 1.3 per inch. Not great by modern standards, but not nothing. The burlap was the smart part, coarse, woven burlap, coated on one side with a thin lime wash and stretched across the studs over the newspaper. The lime-coated burlap reflected infrared radiation back outward. Same principle as a NASA radiant barrier half a century before NASA existed. The lime side faced inward toward the room. The wood ash was the part Hollis told me about that I had to sit with. Wood ash from a hardwood-burning smokehouse, dry-packed into the cavity between the studs, 8 inches deep. Wood ash has a thermal mass density similar to brick. It absorbs heat slowly, it releases it slowly, and it costs absolutely nothing if you already burn wood. 3 layers: newspaper, lime burlap, wood ash. Total cost in $1953, near zero. Total cost in $2024, maybe $12 worth of burlap and a quart of lime wash. The newspaper and the ash are free. Hollis's daddy did this to every exterior wall in the cabin in the summer of 1953. He took the interior pine boards off, layered the system in, put the boards back on. He told Hollis that within one summer, the inside of the cabin dropped 8 degrees on the worst day of August. I checked the math against the Penn State data. 8 degrees is about right for that combination of materials in that wall depth. It checks out. It's been working in Hollis's cabin for 71 years. I'm going to tell you something straight. I lived for 35 years in a house in Akron that I paid every month to keep cool. I never asked why. I never asked where the heat was coming from. I never asked if there was another way. I paid the bill. I called the HVAC guy when the compressor went out. I bought a new unit in 2014 for $4,200, and I felt like I was being a responsible homeowner. My granddaddy Wendell ran that smokehouse outside Hazard till the day he died. He never paid $1 to cool his cabin. Not because he was tough, not because he was poor, because he knew what was in the walls. He knew what was on the roof. He knew what every generation of mountain folk before him had known. That knowledge was never lost. It was set aside, pushed off the page, stripped out of the 1963 edition of a government pamphlet, replaced with chapters that recommended buying products from 3 specific manufacturers. The lime is still at the Tractor Supply. The burlap is still at the feed store. The ash is still in your stove if you burn wood. The cabin that Hollis lives in still sits at 71 degrees on a 94-degree day, the way it has for 177 years. The only thing that changed is whether anybody told you about it. Now you know. Drop your state in the comments. Tell me what you paid for cooling last summer, and if your grandfather or your father ever did anything to a house that kept it cool without electricity, I want to hear that story. I read everyone. The lime trick is one story. There are 500 more in these mountains that nobody ever wrote down. You leaving a comment is how we keep them from disappearing. Hit subscribe if you want to keep digging these things up with me before they're gone for good. I'm 62. The folks who taught me this are in their 70s and 80s. We don't have a lot of time. Next week, I'm driving down to a place outside Norton, Virginia, to meet a 79-year-old retired coal miner named Vernon Caldwell, who has not paid for a drop of drinking water in 56 years, not $1. He pulls his water out of a 110-foot well through a 3-stage filter his grandfather built in 1948. $3 a year keeps it running. The EPA tried to classify his system as non-compliant in 2012 and walked it back when they couldn't find a single thing wrong with the water. I'll see you there.